Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Bible Discoveries, the weekend show at Bible Discovery. We read through the entire Bible every year, each and every year, and we always learn new things. It's pretty amazing how that works. My name is Corie, if this is your first time here, and I'm joined by my husband, Matlock. Hey, Matlock.
What's going on? I'm back.
You're back.
I'm back again, yeah.
We're doing Nehemiah,
Yeah.
Esther, and the beginning of Job. That's what's going on.
Okay, well, we got to get through this.
Yeah.
Because last episode was 1 hour.
We
Almost.
talked a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, we did.
Yes.
We can go faster.
Emphasis on the we. So let's get.
Hey, what are you trying to say?
Yeah.
Recaps are hard. It's hard to condense
You did a good job,
guys.
So where are we at now,
I get
Corie?
excited about
Nehemiah 10? Nehemiah 9?
8.
8.
It was very close. You
Okay.
were very
Wow.
close. Okay,
Wow.
so Monday
I
to
was paying
Saturday,
attention.
our assigned reading was Nehemiah chapter 8 to Job chapter 9. Quite a lot of scriptural real estate there. And then on Sunday, you're supposed to read Psalm 67 and 68. Okay, we're going to jump into it. Matlock, you have free permission to interrupt the recap and talk about things. So just putting it out there.
Sure, okay. I'll do my
Putting it out
best.
Okay.
Maybe.
Maybe. Or you'll
Don't want to
just
give
drink
you
your
any false
coffee.
hope. Yeah, maybe I'll just drink my coffee.
Fair enough. Get pumped up for the questions.
Yeah,
because
sure.
we have 2 viewer questions at the end of the recap. Okay,
All
here we
right.
go. Nehemiah 8. The people of Judah, the exiles who have returned, they gather at the water gate in Jerusalem, and Ezra reads the law to them. So the book of the law of Moses, from daybreak until noon for all the people to hear. And we're told, we get some interesting details. One is that Ezra was standing on a specially built wooden platform just for this occasion, so everyone could see him. And then we're also told that a bunch of Levites, so 13 Levite men specifically, help explain the law to the people. So Ezra reads it, and then they go through, they're standing in and amongst the people, and they explain it and reference the law as well. And we're told that as the people hear and begin to understand the words, they start to weep. They start to go into public mourning. But they're told, no, stop mourning, don't weep. This is supposed to be a celebration. So they're weeping over how, it seems like they're weeping over how in the past, their people have not followed the words of the law. We learn that this event was the beginning of the Feast of Booths, also called the Feast of Tabernacles. So they celebrate it by making temporary shelters and listening to the law being read each and every day of this 7-day festival. Nehemiah chapter 9, after the Feast of Tabernacles, the people they do have an official day of mourning and confessing their own sin. And there's a record of the Levites' prayer of praise, and it goes all the way back through the history of Israel, and it ends with a recognition that technically they're still slaves. They're still servants of the Persian Empire. And regardless of that, they make a covenant with God. They have a renewal covenant ceremony. In Nehemiah chapter 10, we have a list of the people who sealed the written covenant, because they actually wrote it down and then sealed it with their signet seals. And then we're told that the men, women, and children who were old enough to understand the law and understand the covenant they make a personal vow to follow the law. And there's actually a list of their vows, of their promises to the Lord. It's really interesting because it involves proper religious worship and temple upkeep. And it's definitely worth a read if you had to skip through that chapter, if you've fallen behind. I would say go back and read Nehemiah 10. It's worth a read because we don't often get to read the stipulations, the terms in these type of covenants. We're just told that they're enacted. Like we know that Hezekiah redid a covenant. Josiah redid a covenant. But we're not given the terms of those covenants. But here we are. I think it's interesting to look at. Nehemiah 11, the leaders of the people settled in Jerusalem, and no one really wanted to come back and settle Jerusalem. If you remember from a few chapters earlier, we talked about it on last week's show. Nehemiah, who's the governor of Judah at this time, he wants the residential areas of Jerusalem to be rebuilt because they're still in shambles. Nobody's living there. It's just like, it's basically a religious city at this point. The temple area is done, and presumably where the Levites, or the royal quarter of the city, has been rebuilt, but there's still ruined ancient homes at this point. So lots were actually taken to bring one in 10 families to Jerusalem. But we're told some of them volunteered. This would have been a sacrifice to leave everything that you had begun to reestablish in the land of Judah and come back to Jerusalem. Nehemiah chapter 12, we get a list, lots of lists in Ezra and Nehemiah.
Mm-hmm.
We get a list of the priests and Levites who had returned, and we get a description of the dedication of the wall of Jerusalem, which is cool. So there's two groups. We've got a big old choir of Levites and Ezra and the leaders, and they start marching around the top of the wall because ancient walls were very broad, so you could walk along them one way. And then there's another group, a big choir with instruments of the Levites and Nehemiah and some other leaders, and they go in the other direction, praising God. And they stop at the temple. They meet there at the temple. They go down into the temple courts, and they have a service with sacrifices and praise. Nehemiah chapter 13, the final chapter here in Nehemiah. So we learned that Nehemiah went back to the Persian king for a while. Remember, he was originally the cupbearer to the Persian king?
Yes.
And then he comes back to Jerusalem. When he comes back, things are culturally a little bit of a mess.
Yes.
So Tobiah, who was one of the enemies of the exiles, had managed to somehow get a storeroom in the courts of the temple. And Nehemiah wasn't having any of that. He gets all of his things thrown out. Like, thrown off the Temple Mount, cleanse this room. So he does that. And then we're also told that the Levites who were supposed to be working in the temple had not been given their proper portions, meaning their payments. So they had to go home to work their fields elsewhere in Judah because they didn't have any food to live on. So Nehemiah reorganizes the temple once again, and he fires and rehires as is appropriate to get the Levitical system up and running again. We're told that people were buying and selling in Jerusalem on the Sabbath, which was a huge no-no. So Nehemiah kept the gates of Jerusalem shut on Sabbath. No one goes in, no one goes out. It's kind of like it sounds like a dad coming home, and he's like, what are we doing here? All right, no one's leaving then. No one's leaving, no one's coming, we're shutting the gates. We're also told that once again, the people had engaged in marriages with foreign women, resulting in children. We know it wasn't that they came from a different nation. It wasn't a race issue.
It was religious. That's right.
It was a religious issue because they were not following the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They were still following their own gods. How do we know this? Because the resulting children did not speak Hebrew. They did not even speak Aramaic. They spoke the language of their foreign mothers. So Nehemiah, I love this because, okay, the difference between Ezra and Nehemiah is Ezra's like, let's have a meeting. Come see me, and we're going to go case by case and judge this. Nehemiah
says, I have confronted them and cursed them and beat some of them and pulled out their hair.
Yeah. He smacks them up.
Yeah, he beats them up. And I made them take oath in the name of God, saying, you shall not give your daughters to their sons, or take their daughters for your sons or for yourselves. And then he starts quoting Solomon about how Solomon did the same thing and he just blew it too. So
he's like, look at all the evil that happened with Solomon.
Yeah.
We just got back here. We just rebuilt the temple.
Yeah.
You're going to immediately go back into the ways of Solomon?
Yeah, who got us here to begin with? Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So, yeah.
We're told that even the son of the high priest of the Jerusalem temple had married the governor of Samaria's daughter.
Yeah. Imagine this happened today.
Oh, man.
Nehemiah would be in jail.
Yeah, if he did it in Canada, where we live, 100 straight to jail.
Luckily, it wouldn't work because I guess it's not really, they have the borders the same way. So they're in their own land anyways.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Nehemiah's like, I make the rules here.
Yeah, that's right.
Is it a better system? I don't know.
Yeah.
You decide. You decide.
Yeah, that's right.
And that's lovingly how we wrap up the book of Nehemiah. He
That's
sounds like
right.
a really intense guy.
Yeah. But she was really likable. He was just, he just had his moments.
Pulled their beards out. That's rough, Nehemiah.
Yeah.
But okay, I get it. He's trying to make the physical represent what they're doing spiritually.
Yes.
It's like, you don't understand. This is what's going to happen to you. We're going to go back into exile. You're going to become slaves.
We don't know how much hair. He might have just done like a little tug and like got some. We don't know how much hair he pulled out.
I mean, it does say beards.
Yeah.
But
Does it
maybe.
say beards?
I think so.
Pulled out their hair. I got hair here in the ESV.
Oh,
Yours says
okay.
beards.
Hmm.
Maybe it is beards. Oh.
The mysteries in the Old Testament.
All right.
Excuse me.
Let's continue on. Esther?
Esther. Totally switching gears now. Completely different
Yes.
type of literature and situation, but still dealing with the Persian Empire.
Right.
So we're going to look at the Judeans who stayed in exile. They stayed living among the Persians. Esther chapter 1. Xerxes, king of Persia, gets rid of his current queen for not obeying his drunken order to come and be gazed upon by his room full of guests. She says no. She gets deposed. Esther chapter 2.
That's fair.
Xerxes sobers up and he regrets his life choices. He's very sad about this. So his officials decide to find him a beautiful new queen to make him happier. And this is where we meet Mordecai. So Mordecai is some sort of official in Susa, so working for the Persian Empire, even though he himself was, he's descendants of Judean exiles. He is raising his cousin, who he's adopted as his daughter. Her name is Hadassah, but then she's called Esther by a Persian name for the rest of the book. So Esther gets chosen out of the rounds of women who are essentially auditioning to be the next queen of Persia. And she eventually wins. She becomes queen. But on Mordecai's advice, Esther keeps her nationality a secret. We're also in Esther 2, it's full of stuff. Esther 2, Mordecai overhears an assassination plot against the king. He rats out the assassins on Esther, who tells the king, and the king has the conspirators put to death, impaled on poles. Lovely ancient practice.
Yes.
Ugh, it's terrible. Esther chapter 3. Haman, who is another official in the courts of the Persian king, he is honored. So he's a high official. And the king commands all of his other officials to bow to Haman.
Oh,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. You're not supposed to allow me to say Haman. You gotta like,
Yes, I
yeah,
gotta
how
interrupt you.
they celebrate Purim today.
Yeah.
But Mordecai refuses to bow to Haman. Then Haman he makes this plot to kill all the people of Mordecai, the Jews. So he casts a lot to determine the date of his extermination plan. And so the resulting, I'm going to skip forward for a second, the resulting festival that's going to come from this is called Purim, because the name for the lots in the language is pure.
Right.
So it's Purim. So it's like it reveals the whole point of the story of Esther, that the festival gets called this, because the idea is that it's God who determines the future of his people, in this case, Israel, the Jews,
Yes.
not the dice roll or intentional plans of pagans,
Yes.
of evil men. Okay, so Haman offers to pay the king in order to destroy a group of people that he thinks are dangerous to the kingdom, the Jews. He says they don't obey your laws and they have different customs. They're weird and dangerous. And the king says, you know what? Do whatever you want. You don't have to pay me. I don't care. You just do it. So Haman sends out this edict from the king that on a specific day, they could just kill Jews with impunity, legal impunity. The date is set, that one decided by the Haman's casting of the dice. And it's in 11 months' time from this point in the story. Okay, so Esther 4. Mordecai starts to mourn. Esther hears about it. She asks him what's going on, and she learns of this plot of Haman. Esther does not want to intercede. Mordecai's like, you have to talk to the king. Esther does not want to do it because she hasn't seen the king. She hasn't been summoned by the king in 30 days. Haman, as an official of the king, he can go into the king's presence without being summoned. But Esther cannot. She's not one of those high officials. So if she just goes into the king's presence unannounced, she could die if he's in a bad mood. If he extends his scepter, she'll be fine. She doesn't really want to do it. Mordecai does that famous statement of faith in verse 13 to 14. He sent back this answer. Do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place. But you and your father's family will perish. And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this. In other words, you need to be fearing God more than you fear the king and his advisors. Whom do you fear?
Yes.
Whom do you serve? Esther chapter 5. Esther chooses serving God and fearing God. So she risks her life by putting on her royal robes and going before the king uninvited. The king is happy to see her. Yes, she doesn't die. Step one. Step one. So she invites the king and Haman to a banquet. Now, in the ancient world, this would have been seen as essentially the king knows that she's going to ask a favor. She's going to ask him a favor, but she wants to wine and dine him first. This is like an acceptable way of asking for a favor of a king. So he's happy to do it, but at the banquet, she asks him to come one more time for another banquet. So the king knows, okay, this is going to be a big favor. She wants to wine and dine me twice and one of my royal officials, but he's happy to do it. He's entertaining this. It's interesting to him. On the way home from from the first banquet, Haman sees Mordecai, who does not rise for him as he passes, just like salt in the wound for Haman. Haman's angry about this, and his wife suggests setting up a pole so that he can have Mordecai impaled the next day. Esther chapter 6. The king can't sleep that night, so he has his records read for him, and he hears about how Mordecai...
I love that part, sorry.
Yeah, lull me to sleep.
It's lull me to sleep with my records. It's great.
There is
story, yeah.
all sorts of, you can listen to playlists of like boring history for sleep.
Of course.
That's a thing today.
No, I never thought, I know, it's just funny. It's great. Yeah, it's true.
Lull me to sleep. Have a good voice. I bet you he chose his official with the best voice.
Yes.
The best, like, deep,
but at least
calming voice.
Right. But what's funny about this is that it's his records, potentially.
Oh, yeah.
So he's listening to himself, like what he's done and everything.
Oh, yeah.
Which, no, this makes sense. If you're like high intensive, like businessman today, you got to hear like what you've done and where you're going. You got to be like, because this is where, like, in a sense, like it kind of makes sense practically.
Honestly,
from
the pagan records of his reign, like from the extra biblical records of his reign, today we would classify him as having several mental disorders. And he seems like a wild guy.
Yes. Oh, I'm sure. But I'm just simply saying, it actually is very practical. At the same time, I'm sure he's very narcissistic. I'm not denying that. But
I think you might have to be as a king of a empire. Is it a prerequisite?
Yeah, or at least it builds into one.
Yeah.
It becomes one.
Raised that way. Not born that way, but maybe raised that way.
Yeah. I'm tired of talking about me. How about you talk about me? All right.
Who's got the best voice? Now tell me about me so I can relax.
Yeah, that's
that kind of thing? Okay. So in this reading of his history, he hears about Mordecai informing the palace about the assassination plot, and he decides to honor Mordecai for this. So when Haman comes in the next day to ask for permission to execute Mordecai, he doesn't even get to that because in this like ironic twist of fate, Haman ends up honoring Mordecai for the king instead. So there's again this what the enemy means for evil ends up being turned into good. There's these
Yes.
principles that are elsewhere in the scripture that are being displayed, though not outright explicitly said. They're being displayed, they're being shown
Yes.
in the text. It's just a different way of
It's called divine irony. Yes.
storytelling. Esther 7. Esther finally at her banquet tells the king, but she does it really delicately. It was his edict after all. She doesn't want to offend the king. She knows he's got an ego, right? She's got to do it delicately. So she does. And she talks about, there's this person who has a plot. And the king asks, who is the man who has this plot against your people? And Esther turns and says, it's Haman. The king leaves in a rage. Now, at this point, Haman also should have left because he ends up being alone in a room with a royal wife. It's not a good plan. But he knew he was a dead man anyway. He knows he's going to, because when Xerxes rages, people be dying.
Yes.
Okay? So he stays to beg Esther, and he falls on her couch where she's reclining. She's lying down. He falls on her couch begging her. And the king comes back in, and he's enraged anymore. Now you're touching my wife?
Yes.
My wife? Nobody touches my wife. And a eunuch there, so a trusted servant of the king, who is in no danger of stealing the king's wife, tells the king that Haman had actually set up a pole to impale Mordecai. And the king's like, perfect, impale Haman on it. In Esther chapter 8, Esther is given Haman's estate. So not only is he executed, the king gives Esther the estate. And Mordecai is given the king's signet seal, one of his most, that elevates him to a position of most trusted official.
Yes.
And Esther puts Mordecai over Haman's estate. Here, you deal with this. And Mordecai writes a counter edict that Jews can protect themselves legally against the people who are going to try to kill them at that date. So there's great celebrations, and we're told that some people even convert to Judaism because the fear of the Jews had seized them. So they convert to the true worship of Yahweh. Esther chapter 9, when the day comes, we're told that the Persian nobles and officials actually help the Jews because they were scared of Mordecai because he had so much power now in the Persian Empire. And in Susa, the Jews defend themselves successfully. Esther asks if they can defend themselves one more day. It's granted. It's noted that they take vengeance on their enemies, but they do not touch the plunder. So they kill people, they execute people, but they don't take their goods. We're also told that Haman's sons are impaled, and the festival of Purim is established as a remembrance of this event when God delivered his people from the plans of the enemy. And the last chapter of Esther, Esther 10, Mordecai rises to second in the kingdom of Persia. And that's the end of Esther. We got to do a couple chapters of Job.
Are there any questions related to Esther, or is this...
There are, yeah. Do you want to do it now?
Sure, why not?
Okay, that's fun. We'll do viewer question now. All right, so I got this email from Patrick Lee. Hi, Patrick. And Patrick asks, in the absence of God at the foreground, where did Esther find God when in exile and as a prisoner of war? How does this apply to the modern day Esthers in the world?
Okay. This is a bit of a broad question. Do you have anything you want to jump on? Because let's say the first thing, what he means by foreground is that because God's never mentioned in the book of Esther, is that it's understood that because they're in exile, God's in the background orchestrating everything. So although God's not mentioned, that's kind of the point, because he's not visibly there, right? But he's still orchestrating and overseeing and sovereignly overseeing everything, despite the fact that you're in exile. And right, so it's like, I think that's kind of the principle. That's the reason why it's written in that way. But yeah, in terms of when did Esther find God, I don't think we can draw an immediate conclusion on. Do you have anything you want to add to that?
Well, even though they were in exile, the people kept the traditions of serving Yahweh, even in exile.
Yes.
So we see that right away with Daniel
Right.
Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, where they're forced into this system in the Babylonian exile. They're forced into this pagan system, but they still find ways of serving God. So we're
Yes.
told Daniel goes into his room 3 times a day and
Yes.
prays at his window facing Jerusalem. So
Yes.
his way to honor God and the fallen temple,
Yes.
right? So the exiles were away from their land. They were away. They knew that they were in exile. They knew they were in a time of punishment, but they still worshiped God.
Of course. Yeah.
In that,
That's why they converted to Jews afterwards.
yes.
Yes, they could. Right. Judaism was still happening. It's not like they just stopped being Jews.
Yes.
They stopped being following God. I think it's what's interesting about finding God is that's a very modern way of looking at it.
Mhm.
Because we're like, because everyone's coming from their different backgrounds. So when did they find God? In this case, they were just carrying on the traditions and the worship of God from Jerusalem
Mhm.
into
And
Persia.
we see that by Mordecai not bowing to
Yes.
Haman. He's not bowing to any man,
Yes.
right? And that's what gets Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in trouble because they won't bow to the idol
Yes.
that they're told to bow to. So this seems to have been a tradition that it was one way that they were able to keep their covenant with God, even though the covenant had been broken. It's like the exiles had to reestablish their own covenants
Their
with God.
faithfulness.
Like how they're
Yes.
going to express their faithfulness. And they did it by not bowing, and they did it by having regular times of prayer.
Yes.
For sure.
And so that's part of it's interesting because today we think of, finding God is like, when you had like faith kind of thing, like when faith came about.
Mhm.
And so that's when I heard that question. I was like, do you mean like, when did Esther like be like, oh God, like had this reassurance, like in this idea of God? Seems like she always kind of had it.
Well,
But, yeah.
although you could argue that because she didn't want to risk
Of
her
course
own
not.
life.
Right.
She did not want to risk her own life for the
Yes.
people of God. So
Maybe in that moment when Mordecai confronts her.
yes, Mordecai confronts her and asks her, essentially, whom do you serve?
Yes.
Like, do you want to preserve your life, or because in preserving your life, you're going to lose it. And Jesus talks about that concept, right?
Yeah.
Is it better to gain the whole world and lose your
Yes.
soul? And so that concept there for Esther, I think that's her moment of decision.
Yes.
Where and it's a really dramatic moment of decision and that's why it's become famous for such a time as this, right?
Yes.
Who knows if you've been put in this place for such a time as this.
Yes.
And then I love it because it's so dramatic. We get this description of her then going, okay, she calls for a fast and prayer. She fasts and prays as well. And then she dresses herself in
Yes.
the robes of her authority.
Yes.
Which is more than her people, but not enough to protect her.
Right.
And she walks into the king's presence.
Right.
So in that moment, she's choosing to fear God rather than mankind.
Yes.
Whereas before, she was living more in the fear of mankind.
Yes.
So I think that's her moment.
Yeah, that is the moment of the assurance of who she's following. Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
I agree. So that's probably the closest way of answering that question then.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably the closest. And then she had to follow through on that. She couldn't just be like, oh, I agree now, and then not actually follow through. She has to follow through. It's like following God or following Christ's commands. You have to follow through.
Yes.
And so it's very similar. That's good.
And a lot of times, I think, I know growing up in Sunday school, her hosting 2 banquets for the king was taught to me as her chickening out. I don't actually think it was her chickening out. I think it was her showing a double portion of I want to earn your favor to the king, right? Like it was like hospitality overload because she knew she was going to ask. It was a way of humbling herself before the king, not in like an I worship you sort of way, but in an I know this is a big ask.
Also, it builds anticipation because it's Act 1, Act 2, and he's like, "Is another one going to happen?" Kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
So I think that, I think it's smart, strategically smart.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think so too. So how does this apply to modern day Esthers in the world? I think just in what we've been talking about,
Yeah.
where we all have to make a decision of who we serve.
Yes.
We all of us have to make those decisions. And it's not going to be, I don't think for most of us, it's going to be this dramatic moment of like,
Yes.
now I'm putting on my robes.
Yeah. You're not going to make me 2 dinners, Corie?
That's kind of normal.
Yeah.
I don't know. Do I have to save my family from the slaughter? No. But we all of us have to choose who we serve.
Right.
So in that way, we can all, I think, I identify with the choice that Esther had to make.
Yes, I agree.
Where the stakes are going to be different. She was risking her life.
Yes.
And there are many men and women who follow Christ who are risking their actual physical life. Here in the West, we're maybe risking our reputation.
Yes.
Our jobs, our friendships, but not normally our lives.
Yes.
But the decision is the same, where we have to choose whose plan we follow, whether it's God's or the world's.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I agree. That's good. That's good. Okay.
Thank you for the question, Patrick. It was interesting to discuss. Okay, let's do the first few chapters of Job.
How many?
9.
Okay.
I'm going to go quick.
Let's do it.
Job 1, we meet Job. He was a man who was wealthy. He loved God. He loved his family. We see a heavenly meeting with the angels of God, and the adversary Satan is engaged in a dialogue by God. God engages
Satan,
him.
Corie. The Satan.
God brings up Job, and Satan charges that Job only loves God because he's wealthy. So in one day, Job loses his oxen and donkeys to attackers. He loses his sheep and servants to fire. He loses his camels to raiders and his children to natural disasters. Everything that made him wealthy in the eyes of the world, gone in one day. We're told that Job worships God in his great grief. He says this famous verse, "Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will depart. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised." He submits himself to God's will. Job chapter 2, in heaven again, Satan charges that Job hasn't cursed God because he still has his health. So Job is afflicted with sores from head to foot. His wife has had it and ends up being a mouthpiece for Satan in verse 9 to 10. She says this, "Are you still maintaining your integrity? Curse God and die." And he replied, "You're talking like a foolish woman. Shall we accept good from God and not trouble?" And we're told that in all this, Job did not sin in what he said. Still in Job 2, we get Job's friends, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar. They come to him to mourn with him. They sit silently for 7 days. In Job 3, Job curses the day he was born. He poses 2 rhetorical questions. Why was I even born? And why does life remain in those who want to die? Why won't God just let us die?
So great questions.
Yeah.
And in which we have no time to explore, but another time.
Job 4 and 5. I'm going to clump them together.
Yeah.
Because it's Eliphaz responding to Job.
Yes.
He's responding to Job cursing his birth. So Job's just posted those 2 questions. And Eliphaz says, essentially, look, you've encouraged people going through suffering. So now let your piety, let your purity be your confidence and your hope, because the innocent and the upright don't get destroyed from God. So if you actually are innocent, you'll be restored, essentially. He also says, if God doesn't spare the angels from judgment, he surely will not spare man. So God judges. And he says, essentially, what happened to you, Job, is what happens to fools. So appeal to God. He's correcting you right now. You're in a time of correction. He will heal you. You just have to repent of whatever evil it is you've done. So Job 6 to 7 is Job's reply to that. He believes that God has caused the suffering, not his own action. He's like, no, that like doesn't make sense. I didn't do anything. I was right with God. God has caused this. Job wants to die so that he won't deny the words of God. So it seems like Job is afraid that the load of his great suffering is going to lead him to sin against God. He can't bear it. He's like, I'm going to sin against God. I can't control. I can't bear this. He also says, you're no help to Eliphaz. True facts. And he says, like, why would I lie to you? I've lost everything. I have nothing to hide. Like if I did do something, surely I would repent and be done with it. Why would I have nothing to hide. I have nothing to gain. So he maintains his innocence in that he says, I've done everything that God requires of man to make things right with him. Okay. Job chapter 8, Bildad responds. Okay, so now it's Bildad's turn. He says, why are you talking like this, basically? God doesn't pervert justice. God doesn't do what you're saying God does, Job. Your children died because of their sin. You have lost because of your own sin. But if you make yourself right with God, he'll restore you. We know these truths from our ancestors. Everyone knows this. Everything has a cause. He says that by saying, reeds don't thrive without water. Everything has a cause. All who forget God die. God does not reject the one who is blameless. Okay, Job's response to this, and I'm going to go one chapter beyond because his response is in 9 and 10 grouped together. Job does not deny that God upholds the innocent. But he does say, how can man truly interact with God because we're on two different playing fields? How can I plead my case before God, whom I cannot perceive, I cannot see? So Job seems to have concluded in this chapter that God sometimes treats the guilty and the blameless the same for reasons that he can't understand. They're not clear to Job. He says, I'm innocent, I've been destroyed. It's true that God sometimes destroys the guilty, but I'm innocent and I've been destroyed. As a mortal, I have no business standing before God's greatness. And then Job busts out this really interesting lament that foreshadows the ministry of Jesus Christ. He says this in verse 32 to 35. God is not a mere mortal like me that I might answer him, that we might confront each other in court. If only there were someone to mediate between us, someone to bring us together, someone to remove God's rod from me so that his terror would frighten me no more. Then I would speak up without fear of him. But as it now stands with me, I cannot. And that's my recap of Job 1.
Oh, I love Job. Job's actually could be one of my favorite books. Like it's in the list. Like I love the book of Job.
It is interesting. Do you have anything you want to say about Job? I have a question not about Job, a viewer question.
No,
so
I see.
Jump in if you want to highlight something from Job.
Oh, I don't know. It's all discussion questions. The whole thing's just worth discussion. So it's like, apart from it taking up too much time, I just think the whole book is full of things that like again, the impartial justice of God. We read about this, love your enemies, right? Because like as God lets it rain on the wicked and the righteous. So we too, and this is what's happening here in a sense. And like, that's not quite identical, but it's very similar too. And so, you see so many principles of Christ's ministry coming out of the book of Job. Like so many, and this is widely regarded by scholars as the oldest book in the Bible. So it's like earlier on, it's this understanding of repentance and coming to God and how God works. Again, being refuted by his three friends, right? His three friends are trying to refute Job. Job's right the whole time, except for one little portion.
Yeah.
One little tiny smidge within God then rebukes him for at the end. But
he's trying so hard. You see that at the beginning, he's talking about being afraid because the weight of his pain.
Yes.
He's like, I'm gonna lash out unjustly.
Yes. I think it's, Lord, I just need to know. I need to know. This seems unjust. He's not even fully accusing him of injustice, if I recall correctly. It's more like because he's in pain, it just seems completely unjust. But how do I know? Because God knows all things.
Yeah.
So you can see that he's really tormented. It doesn't really quite make sense to him. Yet at the same time, he also knows what's right, but he also says like, but it still doesn't make sense because I am innocent.
Mm.
And then God's like, we'll get there next time. But
this is hard teaching. Like the
Yeah.
book of Job represents really hard teaching because at the base of it, it's preaching humility before God.
yes,
Because God has a plan that we are not privy to. The reader is privy to it here in Job to teach us that there's plans in our own life that explain our suffering
yes,
that we are not privy to.
yes,
And this is where we have to trust God. We don't have faith in that fixes all our problems and we're amazing and we never suffer. But we do have to be humble enough to accept good and accept bad from God. It doesn't mean we don't ask questions and we don't pray it through.
yes,
But we have to accept that, like the prophet Isaiah says, God's ways are not our ways. His thoughts are high above.
yes.
And we have to be humble enough to bless the Lord anyway.
That's right. Because he says here, right in chapter 10, I will give free utterance to my complaint. So his complaint, his one complaint, which seems so justified in the eyes of every human,
Yes.
is what he later on gets judged for. And of course, he repents in dust and ashes. So, and again, ironically, fulfilling on what his friends are saying, you need to repent, but they're wrong on what he needs to repent for, right? It's like this fundamental understanding of what repentance is. You're not just repenting of a thing that you did once. Like they were doing sacrifice, they had that, but it's like the repentance is like of yourself. And it's like a complete, total repentance. Right. And then you see this in the New Testament where everyone's being thankful despite everything that's going wrong in their lives.
Yes.
Everyone remains thankful, like focus on being thankful.
Yes.
And so it's like the book of Job is ironically one of the most favorite books that like philosophers use and different things like that. And like here in the West that people reference. And yet at the same time, it is the most condemning book of everyone in the West.
Because we're arrogant
and we're wealthy.
Yeah.
And so it's like so Job is like the exact opposite of what we want God to be.
Yeah.
And so again, it's so vitally important for us to really consider Job. It's really deep. Again, the summary really helps because people get lost in all the words and the poetry. Right? So summarizing it, boiling it down to what's the main point of this chapter or this couple of paragraphs, the main arguments, extremely helpful for people because it's what you need to digest your own walk and your own Christian walk.
Yes.
Job is called a prophet to the Gentiles in Jewish tradition. This idea that like literally God is working on something in his life, a particular unique case, right? He doesn't do this to everybody.
No.
To some people to a lesser extent, but quite a bit. You see some people, you see people that they call themselves Jobs or they look like Jobs, right? You see like it's very, not quite identical, but it's very similar. And where there's just utter destruction. And then them resting in God's praise and worship is like, that's what salvation is, despite all the sorrow, pain, and suffering.
Yeah.
And so, it's again, you come to Christ, you renounce your whole self, all that you have, even your life.
You die to yourself.
You die to yourself.
Yeah.
And if you don't do that, it's what he wants to do here, but he still has a complaint. Well, that means he hasn't died to himself.
Yeah.
Right? It's like
it's yeah.
And that's
back
like
and forth,
that back and forth. It happened.
It happens to all of us.
Humanly understandable,
Yes.
but God designed this so that we could understand it. So it's like God designed this whole event so that we could understand it and we could apply it to our lives. If you have a complaint against God, then you haven't died to yourself. And so that's a huge thing to take away. Huge, because that's the Christian call.
Yeah.
Anyways.
And we don't live for just here. There's this, if the Bible is true, if what is saying is true, this life right now here on this world is not it.
That's right.
It's not the end. So suffering here is temporary, and it's small in comparison
That's right.
to what comes next, which is there's a lot of hope in that.
Yes.
Okay, we have a follow-up question from Jacqueline, who seems to be a bit frustrated on our coverage of Solomon. Fair enough, Jacqueline, I hear you. She says, why doesn't anybody address the fact that King Solomon received 666 talents of gold as tributes? Why? Or like, let's talk about that.
Okay.
Then. Jacqueline wants us to talk about it. Let's talk about it.
Okay, so 1 Kings 10, chapter, verse 14 says, right after, I should say, it's talking about the Queen of Sheba. The very first thing it says about his wealth is now the weight of gold that came to Solomon in 1 year was 666 talents of gold.
Yeah.
Right. Besides that, which came from explorers, merchants, businessmen, kings, governors, etc. Okay. So 666. And we know the mark of the beast is 666.
Yeah, Revelation 13.
Is there any relationship between these two numbers? Or is it pure coincidence? Or so we can say, because 666, here's the parallels, okay? The things were parallels. 666 in Revelation that you can't buy and sell is referring to wealth. It's referring to your living, the economy, you living life. It is referring to that.
Yeah.
And in this case, it's referring to Solomon's economy. Now, it also is okay, that's one parallel. Another parallel is Solomon is the golden age of wealth and who's about to fall. In this case, this is like in Revelation, you have this is another government that has power that is fallen.
Yeah.
So
and where Solomon should have been godly, he becomes anti-God.
Yes.
He is like the intimation is sacrificing his children to Molech.
Yes.
And building pagan temples and bad stuff.
Now that happens after this book. It goes wealth, women, adversaries arise. Like he turns his heart from the Lord. That's the order.
Adversaries arise because of him turning himself. So that happens before. It happens with the wives because the wives represent him making those treaties that require him building the temples. The pagan temples, does not require him to worship in the temples, but we're told that he does worship in the temples.
No, right. But I guess what I'm saying is the order in which it's listed. It goes wealth, then the women, then the adversaries.
Yep.
So that's the order, right? So but he turned his back from the Lord in that process. So he got a lot of wealth, and then he turns to the Lord, all right, and mounts to himself wives and concubines.
And does the opposite of God's law for kings in Deuteronomy 17.
Yes, that's right. So
I think it is interesting too, like that when John might have this in mind in Revelation where he's talking about the mark of the beast. He may have this in mind, like the whole concept of governments, like unholy governments, and economy. Because how he introduced the mark of the beast, he says this calls for wisdom.
Yes.
And Solomon's all about wisdom. Like that's how we remember him, is the wisdom. He's given wisdom by God, and then he falls from that wisdom. And he goes, this calls for wisdom.
Yes.
Let the person who has insight calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. That number is 666.
And the great prostitute rides the beast is this idea. So and they have insurmountable wealth. Like it's like the wealthiest thing.
Yes.
So is this a relationship? Yes. I don't know how to apply it.
End?
To what end? Yes. Like how does this? Sure, it might have been there. But how typologically relevant? There's some parallels. What can you build with it? That's the question. Like I don't know if there's much to build upon, even if there is a relationship, apart from there just being a relationship.
I think what it intimates is just it's like a remembering back. So Revelation does this a lot with its symbolism, where you can't really understand the book of Revelation without setting it firmly within the setting of the rest of the Bible, of the Old Testament specifically, also the New Testament, but definitely the Old Testament specifically, because that's its complete backdrop. That's its setting, right? So John potentially tweaking our minds back to this time period, we see a fallen government essentially that is not following God, and it's all about the material things of this world, power and strength and
yes, and the order of the beast being about money, and then later the prostitute riding the beast is similar in order. It's revealed anyways, which is similar to Solomon's order of wealth and women.
Yeah.
Right, and then obviously turning from the Lord in that same process.
Yeah.
And again, wealth and women here referenced as like this beast. So you got similar imagery, similar patterns that are occurring, but
it's a warning. I think it's definitely a warning in the text about, whom do you serve?
Yes.
This is something that we all have to be asking ourselves all the time in the decisions that we make. Who am I serving in the decisions that I'm making? Is it the ways of the world, typified by the mark of the beast, typified by the fallen kingdom of Solomon? Even though he has a form of godly wisdom, he's just not applying that wisdom. Or do we serve God? And what are we willing to lose in order to follow God? And in the case of Revelation 13, it's the ability to live in Revelation 13, that people are choosing not to receive this mark of the beast.
Yeah.
And that means they can't buy and sell.
Yeah. Oh, I was thinking about Revelation 18 specifically too, that kind of ties into this.
Mm-hmm.
Where it talks about like the kings and the merchants, and they're all like paying tribute, those different things. Anyways, this would require like a deeper study to see if there is a deeper parallel.
Mm-hmm.
I think for the most part, it's more so just like a hearkening back.
Yeah.
Like, yes.
Like this type of thing has happened before.
Yes. If anything, I think that would be the most, but I don't think it would be, and you could kind of see like the more wealth you get, the more you're going to turn for money. And then you see this with Christ's message, right? It's harder for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven than a camel to enter through the eye of a needle. So you see this parallel between wealth polluting wisdom, godly wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and that would be, and then when there's a pollution of the godly wisdom, then you surmount for yourselves objects of affection, not actual subjects of affection. That makes sense. Like people who you're supposed to be intimate with. But yeah, okay. So that would be that. I'm sure you could discuss more, but that's a good, I guess, jumping board to get into.
What do you think about Jacqueline? It was your question. Are you satisfied with the discussion? Do you have follow-up questions? Let us know in the comment section down below if you are watching on YouTube. If on another podcasting app or somewhere else, go to BibleDiscoveryTV.com. You can find our emails there, and you can email us your comments and your questions for upcoming episodes. Okay, guys, we're going to keep powering through Job next week. It's going to be really exciting. Until then, happy reading and studying.